President William Ruto's 2 years in office have been marred by financial crises of unimaginable proportions, with all his government finance bills triggering nationwide protests and falling flat in the courts of law.
That's right. Now, from what has been termed what he termed as empty coffers when he assumed office, President Ruto's 2 years in office have been characterized by an astronomical rise in public debt. Once again, our very own Stephen Leto has the details.
Within 2 years into his term in office, the economy has proven the heaviest burden for President William Ruto. The fiscal deficit widened from 6.3% of GDP in 2022 to 7% in 2023 as revenues underperformed and interest costs rose.
The economic turbulence that we are in demand more than a manifesto that makes a catalogue of pledges that, if implemented, could push the country beyond the tipping point. It requires a credible economic turnaround plan, a plan that gives Kenyans credible and realistic hope.
Public debt expanded from 66.7% of GDP in 2022 to 70.2% in 2023, driven by increased loans to finance the primary deficit and by exchange rate depreciation. However, Kenya's economy grew 5.2% in 2023, up from 4.8% in 2022.
In many respects, Kenya has improved. But that is not to say that we are where we want to be. Because, Leto, I should not be spending a lot of time to convince you that the GDP has grown by 5.6%. I should also not be belaboring the point of the fact that inflation has come down.
Government of Kenya will make sure the Ministry of Agriculture is working round the clock to make sure that every farmer gets the requisite fertilizer before the season is over.
In his economic rebound plan, President Ruto promised to revive the Kenyan economy, improve food production, and provide quality infrastructure, education, and healthcare services. Public debt is also on the rise. In December 2022, Kenya's public debt stood at 9.1 trillion Kenyan shillings, a 5% increase from the 8.7 trillion shillings reported by the Central Bank of Kenya when Ruto's administration took over in September 2022. The total public debt as at end of January 2024 was 11.2 trillion Kenyan shillings, representing 69.7% of GDP.
1.008 trillion Kenya shillings on payments of interest rates alone for our debt obligations. You can imagine that if we are spending only half of the money we are spending to service debts only on interest rates, that will be having a spare of 500 billion to go into roads, to go into electricity, to go into other infrastructural needs for our economy. And we got into this problem because maybe we demanded to do too much within so short a time. That in the 10 years between 2012 and 2022, we accumulated debts of over 8 trillion shillings.
Recently, Ruto has outlined plans to limit borrowing, increase the government's revenue, and cut spending as a mitigation measure, but all these found a stubborn appetite in government. 2 years after assuming office, Kenya's debt has been described as sustainable, with high risk of debt distress, according to IMF.
But I'm glad that we have not fallen off the cliff, as we have seen many African countries do. We saw Zambia trying to renegotiate. And when you hear about renegotiating alone, it is another name of saying we are defaulting. We have seen Ethiopia doing the same. They are currently on an IMF bailout program. So I am glad that even when we are in a tight corner, the way we have been, we have not fallen off the cliff, that we have been able to service our debts, both domestically and foreign, and we can only hope for the best as we proceed.
President Ruto's administration has found itself at loggerheads with the public, with mostly its tax policies met with resistance and protest. The 2023 finance bill was opposed by the Azimio la Umoja coalition, with Raila Odinga leading his troops in street battles seeking to have the bill dropped. Edify and Ruto signed it into law. Then came the Finance Bill 2024 that triggered nationwide protest led by youthful protesters. The Finance Bill that was to finance the 2024-2025 financial year budget was taken through a public participation process, with nearly all stakeholders opposing the new taxes on various products. Despite the public rejection, MPs passed the bill, worsening an already bad situation on the streets. The climax of the protest being the storming of Parliament by the Gen Z's protesters who wanted to evict MPs from the chambers. Sadly, the lawmakers had just made the final vote few minutes before protesters broke into Parliament. Stephen Leto, Citizen TV.